what it ends up making us feel is, oh, I've always felt like this. Oh, I always feel like this. Or, oh, you always make me feel like this. Oh, and then you bring up something in that argument with your partner. You bring up something that's been resolved before because your brain's reminded you of how you felt in that moment when that thing happened. And this is something that happens to us all the time, and we might not even notice it's happening.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome back to AYP Spike, bite-sized brain science. I realised every time I've been introducing this new season, we haven't actually used the tagline, which feels like we should do that. Because for new listeners, hello, you probably don't know what we're doing here. Who are these guys? So we are kind of a neuroscience consultancy company. We talk about neuroscience and we help people get the most out of their brains and therefore themselves. And I am Adam Wright, an AYP consultant, and I co-lead the primary program where we go into primary schools and teach young people how their brains work. And my other excellent, glamorous co-lead and co-host is Andy Feast. Hello, Andy.
Hello, mate. Hello. Thank you. Yep. So happy to be here once again. Feels like we're here,
every week.
We're here every week. But it feels like this time it's been ages since we've last done
This has
one.
been a long week, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Not like in a bad way. It's just been
long.
It's just been a busy week.
My eyes are heavy. It's
I think it's international break. I don't like it.
Just purely upset every morning. Just for the fact that you know that
there's
just not going to happen.
Exactly. As England fans who are going to qualify for the World Cup, I know
who have qualified.
I know this international break matters for countries who haven't qualified for the World Cup yet. I do not care. We're going to be in the World Cup. I just want the season's up and running. Liverpool are stumbling. I'm interested.
Yeah.
Arsenal top of the league. I know we hate that obviously because of the Spurs fan on the table. But let's get it. Why are we stopping the momentum?
So stop-start. It's been unbelievable. So that's a really nice analogy to say how this week's felt. It's felt like the international break. It's been work-wise. It's been really positive. Had loads of clients this week, loads of sessions, and they've been really good. Getting to know everyone and sort of the routes that we want to take on the program. It's been a challenge. It's been really good. I've had some really good questions from parents, and it always makes me laugh when we get so what makes you qualified to do this? And I just think that's such a upfront, excellent question to ask.
I get that a lot,
because you and me are the youngest at AYP by.
Well, you are, yeah.
Yeah, I am.
He claims that you're taking the youngest spot from me.
I do, yeah. Rude. So, and by quite a considerable distance. No offense to our colleagues, but no. Like we're in our mid-20s.
That might get cut.
Yeah. So I don't get fired. So we are a bit younger than most people. So when they join the sessions and they look at me, they might think, oh, this guy's quite young. What qualifies him to talk about all this?
That's a good
well-being stuff. And
you know what? I think that's a great question. And I think with a qualification, in terms of actual qualifications, I have been swim teaching for a long, long time. So I work with kids and adults, and in a kind of a educational environment that's not an actual qualified primary school teacher for a long, long time. But also, I think our main qualification is we're really interested in this stuff.
Yeah,
we're really nerdy about it, but also it's changed our lives. So then we want to spread it. It kind of like. That's why we're so passionate about it. So why I want to do this stuff is because we found it really, really important in our lives, in our development, and that's why we just want to kind of make this stuff as accessible for people as possible. Because the thing about science is, as amazing and brilliant and groundbreaking as it is, and research and all that, there's a kind of a gap between the way that scientists talk, the language we use, because obviously biology, chemistry, all of these things are really complicated. There's a barrier for a kind of layperson to understand it. And I think that that's what we are trying to break down as much as possible, is to try and make this stuff, because this stuff will change your life if you let it. It really will.
For sure.
And we're just trying to make that as accessible for people as possible.
Yeah, and he's given himself a bit of a disservice there. He hasn't fully said his full educational history, which is, wise, and we thank him for that.
Thank you very much.
University degree you went to Bath University.
You've got a master's degree?
I've got a master's in sport and exercise psychology, so that's basically where, I knew I wanted to work in the sort of remit of well-being and it sounds so cringy to say, and I apologise, but we're in the business of people and helping people, and that's something I've wanted to do from a very young age. So as far as our qualifications are concerned, the experiences you gain and learn from at university and life experiences as a whole, a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis at this job is draw upon my own experiences from an age where things were challenging and difficult and go through hard times like we all do, to utilise them and support teenagers, kids who are going through similar experiences.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do is life experience based, but qualification wise, I think it's just important to get out there that, trust us, we are qualified, I promise.
And we know what we're talking about. And, the thing is, the barrier to this stuff, science is open source, right? If you wanted to, you could go and access some of these scientific papers and read about, we call it the worry system, but you could read about the amygdala and all that stuff on yourself, and go ahead, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the way that science is worded is for other scientists, other researchers, other academics. And what we do as a company is we distill that information into actionable ways that you can apply that stuff to your life and give you action to do that stuff. And in fact, we have some listener correspondence from someone who did just that based on one of our TikTok videos. And this is a little note: subscribe to us on TikTok, subscribe to us on Instagram. For those who are watching on YouTube, and just a reminder, you can watch the show on YouTube. It's not going to blow your mind. It's just us sitting in a room chatting. That's fine. It's pretty cold today, so I'm just wearing a jumper.
It's nice in here.
But yeah, you're going to see above my head the comment from TikTok now. Wow,
That's
isn't
cool.
that amazing? Look at that.
I love that.
The science of editing. Isn't that really, really impressive? But yeah, so the video is about, a section of our show last week about why exercise is difficult and people finding exercise hard. I just think it's really important to reiterate that exercise is really important for your body and brain, even if you don't like exercise.
Yeah.
Okay. And as someone who is I exercise a lot. I don't always enjoy my exercising, but I do it anyway, and I feel better because I do it. Okay, and that's why I think it's really important about that. And obviously, check back to last week's episode for more of a discussion on those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, right. So we are like 80 minutes in. Oh God, and we haven't discussed what we're talking about today.
That's
which
a long intro.
Two specific little topics. We're going to talk about mood congruence and rumination. Now, this may be the first time you're hearing about this thing called mood congruence. You might have heard of rumination before in kind of a sociology, psychology kind of term. So we're going to hit on both of these things really, really quickly. But here's some definitions to start with because we are scientists. Rumination, very, very basically, is kind of overthinking about something, where you overthink about something all the time. You just kind of spend a long time thinking about one specific thing. And it's because you're trying to solve a problem. Your brain likes solving problems. That's kind of, it evolved to solve problems and keep us alive. That's what it does. So it's really good at solving problems. But rumination is when we kind of get stuck trying, often in our worry system, I think we talked about in the previous episode, kind of predicting negatively about things and worrying about those consequences and predicting negatively another thing and predicting those negative consequences and kind of getting stuck in that system. And mood congruence is a really interesting part of what our brain does, which is when we feel an emotion, and again, emotions episode, a couple of episodes back to talk about that more. When we feel an emotion, our brain will make us feel how we felt in previous times we felt that emotion, which is quite a confusing thing, but I can explain it like this. If you have ever argued with your partner or your parents, when you're arguing with them about something maybe you've never argued with them about before, so it's a new thing, it's a minor thing, keep it easy, you will probably then be reminded of all the previous times you've had an argument with your partner. And that is because your brain is offering you're running down a certain set of neural architecture in your brain. And as we said before, your brain builds models for things. And what's happening there is your brain is showing you the models that you previously used in arguments and you've previously built in arguments with people. And attached to those models is a kind of emotional weighting, the feeling that you're feeling now. So your brain reminds you of all the previous times and gives you all the previous models for the current predicament you're in as a way of solving that problem. But what it ends up making us feel is, I've always felt like this. I always feel like this. Or, you always make me feel like this. And then you bring up something in that argument with your partner. You bring up something that's been resolved before because your brain's reminded you of how you felt in that moment when that thing happened. And this is something that happens to us all the time, and we might not even notice it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why, and mood congruence is, we're going to talk about that for the whole episode, but it's not just something that happens, in the kind of arguments with people. This is something that our brain does all the time in terms of seasons. If anything happens to our brain will try and use our previous experiences and our models that it's built in those previous experiences to help us to tackle this new experience, this change that's happening in our lives and stuff like that. So like, for example, when the seasons change and it gets darker, some people, seasonal depression, people start to feel a bit lower as the light levels go away. I know that when the sun starts setting at 4:30 in the afternoon, that's going to be a bit of a hit. That sucks. But mood congruence will remind you of how you felt last year when that, and the year before that when you felt like that, and the year before that when you felt like that. And then you start to feel, oh, I've always felt like this. Why do I always feel like this? But it's just not true. It's your brain offering you a model for something that's happened previously to try and help you solve that new thing.
Beautifully put, as always. Absolutely beautifully put. So it's so important, and I feel like I say this every week, it's so important to understand this stuff, just because, well, once we develop a level of self-awareness to be able to combat these negative feelings, then, well, what else is stopping us from progressing and developing in the areas of our lives that we want to progress and develop in? I just think in terms of mood congruence, it's something that everyone experiences. And it's so interesting to hear you speak like that, because there are so many, it's a negative aspect that our brains remember negative events and negative moods, and our brain had this genius way of creating models and relating to those past experiences. But it's important to say that sometimes that helps us. Our brains trying to attach models to new things from existing knowledge, existing opinions and existing belief systems. That's a really nice way for our brains to sort of compartmentalize new bits of information and new bits of experiences that we're living day to day. But how unbelievably unhelpful is that? It's so unhelpful. It's ridiculous, man.
I think part of it is the understanding that in the same way the worry system has some really annoying excesses, making us predict negative about things and being upset about things and predict things that are just not going to happen, really unhelpful, that you can't do anything about anyway. The mood congruence aspect is similar in that the reason it does it is because it can be helpful sometimes to remember how you felt in a previous situation, to remind you of the models and the ways you resolved it. So if you're having, a tricky, this is why we learn from our experiences, right? That's the whole point, is it's trying to go, this is what you did last time, this is going to help. Your brain's reminding you of that. And remember, your body and brain generate your mind, which is a concept we're going to talk about more in a future episode. But your brain is, it's all about getting kind of back to the insight circuits and trying to sit above this feeling of, I feel like this, and this is because, so the first kind of step is to identify the change that's happened. Again, most of this, your brain will change based on the things that happen to you in your day-to-day life, things you can control and things you can't control. So the first step in kind of trying to notice mood congruence is noticing change, noticing that there's been a change, something that's happened that's made you feel something, and then kind of, like we said in the last couple episodes about emotions, to notice the emotion that's kind of risen, and then also to try and notice that it's your brain is reminding you of previous times you felt like that, and then it's trying to help you to solve that kind of problem by reminding you of those previous instances. And the way to do it is to try and sit above it, to engage into your executive function circuits, which are kind of right at the top of your head, underneath your forehead, which allow you to sit above these things and notice these things happening. So the first thing is to kind of investigate it, notice it, and then just don't be ruled by it, because the thing is, as with all of these processes, you will find that it's automatic, like when we are talking about taking control of our brain and kind of sitting above these things, it's not something that's really easy to do. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it already.
100%.
It's really hard to notice when we are in a mood congruent situation. If we are having a bad day at work and we find we're really annoyed at our boss for whatever reason, or yada 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 yada, we're probably going to feel like we've always felt annoyed at our boss, and that even, and it's not necessarily helpful to feel like that, but it's just because your brain is reminding you of all the previous times you felt like this.
Our brains are so unbelievably powerful that it has the really, again, unhelpful trait of being able to convince yourself of certain things that perhaps aren't reality. So you can convince yourself of a belief or a feeling, but the reality is we don't need to be rot in those spaces. We don't need to have this level of stagnation where we're just like, we're not developing, progressing in the way that we deal and respond to negative external things that we can't control. And I just think that the power of acknowledging, seeing, sitting above what Adam says so eloquently is just, that is such a skill and such a talent and such an amazing thing to aspire towards, because how that will help you in day-to-day life. You might not even feel it. You might not even recognise you are sitting in areas of mood congruence quite a lot of the time. And maybe when you start practicing some positive daily habits, well-being habits that we speak about, and you can just sort of develop a level of self-awareness to combat this, maybe you'll surprise yourself how much better you feel because of it. Like, you don't want to be walking around feeling like you got your tiny little rain cloud above your head all the time. And so many of us for so long sort of just sit there and accept that that's how we feel.
Exactly.
And what I say to my clients at the moment is we don't have to accept the way we feel all the time. We can challenge it.
And you can change it.
And you can change it.
And this is the thing, and I think this is a really good lead actually into kind of rumination specifically, is that there's and when we say this, there's a balance between, if you're sad, it's completely fine to feel sad, and it's fine to be in that sadness a little bit. In fact, if you feel sad and you just kind of bottle it and don't accept it, and you don't feel that emotionally, that's very bad. You should make sure that you're allowed to feel how you feel. But there's also a balance between feeling how you feel and then just kind of, we call it like sitting in a bath of sadness and like ladling more sadness on top. And that is what mood congruence and rumination are going to let you do. And the whole point is that we can take control of our brains and act in a certain way to make those feelings change. And, the idea that we get stuck in these kind of, I feel like this today, and I'm just going to accept that. And that's, sometimes you have to accept sadness. Some things happen in our lives, grief, things like that, where we, part of it is accepting it. Unavoidable. And it's completely fine to feel upset and sad and, angry about things. But you also that doesn't have to be how you feel for the whole day. It doesn't have to be how you feel for the whole week. You can still do things that change that feeling as well. And I think that's what's kind of really important to talk about here, is that, we're trying to tell you this thing happens, and you might not have even noticed it happen.
Yeah.
And in a minute, we're going to talk about things that mood congruence, obviously, everyone's experiences and lives are different. So the ways that kind of thing can pop up in our lives, but also the things that we can do to get out of that mood congruence and understand that we can break free of that kind of our shooting down a certain pathway in our brains.
Yeah, like definitely. And I think when we draw upon our own experiences and you have a moment of self-reflection, and I know that a big part of our practice and as practitioners is self-reflection, and you have to be self-critical, and you have to, in order to grow and develop and maintain a positive upward trajectory in your professional lives, for your school life, for those of you that are listening that are at schools, you have to just have just such a resilience about you in day-to-day life, because the inner dialogue in your head, for so many of us, from speaking to hundreds and hundreds of clients and my own experiences with friends and family and myself, that inner dialogue, and the first thing you think about, what is the first thought when you wake up? And how many of you is that first thought negative? And how many of us just accept that? I think all the time, mate, just at uni specifically, went through a bit of a challenging time. And you just wake up and you're just downbeat on yourself, and you're just ruminating, the mood congruence is all happening all at once, and I'm stuck. I'm just feel utterly stuck.
Exactly, you feel stuck, exactly.
You do. That's the best way to describe it.
And you can't see, there's no way out.
No.
Because you can't see a way out. It's like I always say, it's like an all-encompassing experience.
It is.
It's not like a kind of a feeling in your head that you can just get out of. It is everything.
It makes you feel, you feel
the things that you like you don't enjoy.
100%. That everything just feels a bit heavier, a little bit more challenging. So it's important to understand that these periods can't just last an hour, 2 hours a day. Sometimes people can be in these spaces for months and years. And that's when we start talking about more clinical issues, and we'll get onto those in a few weeks, I'm sure. But just for now, just to understand and appreciate the severity that mood congruence can have on our lives is something that I think needs to be brought to people's attention. Because, if we don't understand this stuff, we're never going to be able to action anything to deal with it. Yeah. And the conversations we have, and just to encourage openness, transparency about how you're feeling. But first, you've got to understand how you're feeling and why you're feeling like it. Yeah. And they sound like two of the most simplest things you could ever experience.
But it's really hard to do, because the point is, when you're listening in a good mood, you understand how you're feeling because you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
but when it's hard to switch it on when you're feeling not good, but that's actually the most important time to do so. Another thing we need to remember about our brains is this concept of neuroplasticity, which is the idea that your brain will change depending on what you do with it throughout your life. So an upsetting fact is, it's a positive fact in lots of ways, but also an upsetting fact is that your brain will get better at what you do with it, because that's just what it does. So if you spend a lot of time, the reason why when you're born, you aren't good at anything is because your brain hasn't practiced that thing yet. And as you grow up, the things you like to do, you practice those things more, you get better and better and better at them. That's because your brain changes and makes it easier to do that thing because you do it all the time. That's just it. You kind of brute force your brain into doing these things. Sometimes you don't like doing that thing, but it's important to practice it anyway, and you still get better at it even if you don't like doing it, but the motivation's not there. Like maths for me, for example, in school, I didn't like maths, but I did it all the time. I did decently in my GCSEs because I practiced it quite a lot,
And his mum's a maths teacher, I just want to say.
Yeah. Shout out, Mum. Thanks for being an excellent maths tutor. But yeah, she always hates it when I diss maths in these episodes. But I do it because she hates it. But the upsetting part is also that what we do with our brain, it gets better at, and that applies to negative things as well. It doesn't just do it to positive things. So if we spend a lot of time ruminating and being kind of trapped in these mood congruent circuits, they get stronger, and they're more. It's harder then to rip ourselves out of that system and sit above it, as I was talking about. So, as I was saying earlier, there's a balance to it. Feel upset, feel angry, notice that you're feeling those things, crucially. But it's also really important to act to try and change that feeling, because otherwise we get further and further entrenched in it, because our brain gets better and better at doing it. I use the analogy when we go into primary schools of this is slightly different because it's worrying. But if you worry all the time and don't, kind of talk to other people and talk about those things, the coping mechanisms we talked about with worrying in our previous episode, you kind of become a professional worrier. You literally build up the strength of your worry circuit, your worry system circuitry, to the point where it gets harder and harder for your prefrontal cortex and other prefrontal cortexes to help and calm you down from those worry systems.
Definitely.
And it's what we do with our brains every single day, the things you do today with your brain will change the brain you get to live inside. So understanding what it's doing and trying to wrestle back control through the actions of the 12 rocks of well-being we spoke about last week is a really important way of understanding that we don't always have to feel like this. If we felt like something for a certain amount of time, we don't have to always feel like this. We can always, as long as you're alive, you will be able to change your brain.
100%. Depending
on what you do with it. And it's just understanding that we can always do that, and the actual actions specifically that we can do to try and get out of that.
Definitely. And I think when we touch upon, what are we feeding our brains? And when I say feeding, I literally do mean sometimes nutritional.
Yeah.
The impact that nutrition has.
That thing we are what we eat, the
it's
food
so
we
real.
eat.
So
and actually,
real.
it's a great little tangent I'd love to go on real quick. So it's like nutritional. I think I spoke last week about a kind of a social health relationship being like eating a nutritional meal versus a burger, and the thing is, I don't want to get into food and calories, stuff like that specifically, but there is food that's better for you, and the food that we eat, that sustains us will feel better because of if we've eaten healthy food, if we've got lots more nutrients in our diet the next day than we do otherwise. And that also affects the way we are, because, we always talk about the brain and the mind, but there's also a crucial part that's our body.
Yeah.
The body obviously is built by what we eat. So if we're eating healthy food, and we're going to do a whole episode about food at some point.
I love food, man.
This is the one Andy's waiting for. He's like, when's the food episode, Adam?
That's all I want to talk about. That's all I'm obsessed with, man. That's a bit of me.
That's Andy all over. But yeah, so no, the food is really, really important. And, understanding that one of the actions that you can take is, this is why we made an episode about the 12 rocks of well-being. Top tip, the way out of a lot of these behaviours and the way to understand all those behaviours and feel better about these behaviours and kind of take back control is to do these rocks of well-being every single day.
Straight up.
When it's difficult, when it's hard, when it's easy. You need to do it all the time, because that builds that well-being, which then allows you to just have a bit more cognitive bandwidth to handle some of the most difficult parts of your life, some of the most parts of your life, but also it gives you the freedom to enjoy the best parts of your life easier.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate this is a bit of a U-turn, but when we're talking about like developing habits and the importance of developing positive habits, is because we understand how difficult it is to break a habit.
Yeah.
So if you
That's what a habit is.
So if you install in negative habits and negative behaviours, they're difficult to break. People can't break negative habits they want to break. But conversely, why are we not speaking about the importance of developing good habits, like practicing your 12 rock behaviours, because they're hard to break. If you make that a part of your daily routine and you do it week after week, month after month, that becomes a really difficult thing to stop doing. And you'll feel the negative effects if you did manage to just break that. But that's the point. It's so hard to actually break out of that.
Yeah.
And in terms of food, and sort of speaking about the sort of importance of what we feed our brains, that's why when we speak about physical, mental and social health as a sort of three-pronged trident, if you want, if we neglect any of those, keep that in. If you neglect any of those, you will suffer. Your brain will suffer it. You're making me laugh.
I'm sorry for the listeners. He's just using his hand as a very small trident, and I'm just blown my mind.
I've got to just tell you, look, man. The amount of sessions this week I've done that. It's crazy. It's ridiculous.
So you're kind of trying to wrap it up.
Yeah. Oh my God, my clients, bless them, man.
You're not really separating them. This is for audio listeners. This is absolutely nothing. But it's
still nothing for you. Go to the YouTube.
Watch the YouTube.
Get the gold. But my point is, those three things. I need to stop doing that. Those three things, you have to look after each with as much onus as you do the next, because without that self-love and that self-care, you are going to suffer for it. And that mood congruence, the effect of that will be greater and more substantial and dictate your life in a far worse way than you could prevent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a good kind of point to end on, I think, is the honesty about this stuff is, we're doing this podcast because, as we said at the start, this stuff matters to us. It's changed our lives. And I think that bringing a bit of personal experience and this stuff into it is important. I think we, all have experiences of mood congruence. You might not even realise that they're mood congruence. It's just the whole point is that your brain does this stuff without you realising it. And we are not in control unless we choose to understand how it works, and then we can take back control. So I get mood congruence. Can you tell that in school I was a bit of a goody two-shoes? Can you tell?
It's a shock to me, mate. It's the first time hearing of it.
You know for a fact that I was, because we were in the same school. But yeah, so I was a bit of a goody two-shoes. So when the couple times that I was told off, I found very upsetting, because I was trying really hard to make sure that I was listening. And, and therefore, when someone has a go at me for, sometimes you just meet people in your life who are a bit angry. They aren't managing their emotions very well, so they take it out on you. And the thing is also to remember is that if someone's angry at you, 99% of the time it's nothing about what you did. It's about themselves and how they're not managing their own feelings and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean it's less upsetting for you. 100% it means it's upsetting, and that stuff spreads. And that's what we said in the emotions episode a few weeks ago. But it reminds me when I'm kind of told off would be the word, but obviously you can't really tell an adult off. But anyway, when I'm told off, it just reminds me of being in year 5 and then someone poking me and me being annoyed at it and reacting, and then the teacher telling me off. And it makes me so upset and angry every single time. And that's mood congruence. Yeah. It's my brain reminding me of previous times where I felt kind of, I guess the word would be like indignation and annoyance, and also like upset because I didn't do anything, like it's this idea that it's like unfair, and it spirals out into all this complicated emotion. And it happened over the summer. This last summer, I was in the lovely city of Bordeaux in France, which I recommend everyone should go to. It's fantastic. And I was trying to go to the toilet, and in lots of these places you have to pay for the toilet. I did pay for the toilet, but they accused me of not paying for the toilet. So I had to then pay for the toilet again.
I can't tell you how mad this kid was this morning about it, man. He was so angry.
I was really ranting.
I've never seen him like it, man.
So they made me pay again, and it's just, that really annoyed me and really set my mood up for the next hour or so. We're walking around this beautiful French city on a lovely summer's day. We've just got there, and I'm just fuming. Like, if I was a cartoon, steam's going out my ears. I'm like, this man just tell me to pay for the toilet, what the hell? And that's mood congruent. I was just stuck in a ruminatory cycle of this guy, I didn't do anything wrong, don't tell me off.
But he practices what he preaches, and as you can see, he has let it go.
I'm letting it go.
That is the main thing.
Exactly. Crucial point. But no, this is what I'm trying to say is this stuff's hard, man.
It is.
It's hard, and it's hard to know when it's happening to you. And so we're trying to spread the word of this stuff and explain how this stuff works. But the crucial part is, practicing what we preach. We do our best to understand this stuff at all times. But the difficulty is the same way that we don't notice it's happening, that you wouldn't notice it's happening if you haven't heard of it before. Even if you've heard of it before, you don't necessarily notice it's happening.
Well, we understand this stuff relatively well and have a good grasp of it.
Yeah,
it still happens in my life.
Exactly.
We're not preaching it because we think we're exemplary human beings, because we're not, and no one is. That's just not the way it is. We have flaws as much as the next man, woman, child. But the reality is, what you have on the sort of journey of self-improvement, which I think everyone does fundamentally, know it or not, you are trying to embark on. You have to owe it to yourself, to others around you, to become a better, more well-rounded person. And if you start actioning some of this stuff and to accept that it is relevant and it is prevalent in all of our lives, that's a really good first step in doing that.
100%. Feels like a great point to end on.
Do you know what? I thought that as soon as I was saying it, I was like, let's wrap this baby up.
That's the end of the podcast, baby. Yes, thank you so much for listening to this episode of AYP Spike. Remember to send us emails at adamwright@aypuk.com, or you can comment on the TikTok and you could appear above our heads in a magical little moment like you did earlier. See, that's the
that's our new jingle.
Church choirs.
Yeah.
To replace the jingle with. Yes. But yes, thank you so much for listening. Remember to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and you can watch the entire show on YouTube. Our shorts are low-key popping off right now.
Yeah.
It's actually insane.
The TikToks are going mad as well.
So, get on there before we go viral. You can say to your friends,
be there from the beginning.
I knew those guys before they were big. So, so get
watch
on
out.
the train. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, look after yourself, guys. See you later.